Hello and welcome to the podcast all about becoming a health coach. I'm Megan McCrory, an integrative nutrition health coach in training. Each week I recap what I'm learning at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and how I'm applying it to my life. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm very happy you found me and a special welcome to you. You may want to go back and listen from the beginning to hear more about my health coaching journey. Let's dive right into week 11. This week's lesson, Module 10, focused on understanding the last macronutrient, carbohydrates, including the types of carbohydrates, dietary sources, and the effects on the body. We got into the pros and the cons of carbohydrates in the diet and how to prepare and cook grains effectively. On the coaching side, we learned about the value in becoming a health coach and also learned the concept of coaching skills. And we were introduced for the first time to Health Histories, which is the very first thing as a health coach we do with potential clients. Currently, the macronutrient carbohydrate is in the hot seat. So in the 70s and 80s, fat and animal proteins were demonized for causing all the health issues. But now with more research, it seems carbohydrates are not also the heart-healthy superfood we were once led to believe, at least not in the form most people are eating it. And that's the key. So carbohydrates are not bad necessarily. It's the form that which we partake of those carbohydrates. The right carbohydrates in our diet can help with digestion. It can help support a healthy weight, and can also provide you with lots of really good energy. However, when you eat too many refined carbohydrates, you increase your risk for chronic inflammation, which leads to all sorts of different health issues, including mostly obesity and type 2 diabetes, of which a lot of other health issues will stem from. So let's first understand what the different types of carbohydrates are. First, there are simple carbohydrates. These are really small compounds that break down very quickly to give you a burst of energy. So these are things like glucose, sugar, which is sucrose, dairy, which contains lactose, fruit and honey, which are also fructose, and malt sugar, which is called maltose. And there's actually tons of other names of sugars, but in a sense, sugar is considered a simple carbohydrate. Okay, those are the easiest things for our body to break down. Even this is a little tricky though. So we're starting off with the simple carbohydrates, but it's also not so simple. So for example, fruit is considered an exception because it also contains fiber. So when I talked about last episode in the week on the Atkins diet, fiber slows the digestion of food, therefore preventing that spike of blood sugar and also preventing the spike of insulin response. So fruit is kind of in this middle area, right? It contains a lot of good antioxidants, vitamins, phytochemicals, minerals, but if you have to eat the fruit like a whole fruit to get the proper benefit. If you eat dried fruit, your calorie density is all messed up. If you eat just fruit juice, you don't have that fiber to help balance out the digestion. So even though fruit is on the simple carbohydrate list, it is not broken down the same as straight up sugar, glucose, or other things that don't have fiber attached with it. The other type of carbohydrates are called complex carbohydrates. And I think a lot of people have heard this term complex carbohydrates. These are larger compounds and they require more time for your body to break them down. So they also slow down digestion and prevent that spiking of blood glucose. Complex carbohydrates are basically starches and fiber. And the vegetables, so these show up in the form of vegetables, beans, legumes, whole grains like brown rice, oats, whole wheat, barley. And remember what I said, I think it was a couple episodes ago, when you have a whole grain and you say, oh, rice. Well, white rice is not a whole grain anymore. Things have been removed, so therefore it's not a whole grain. So the more that your grains are processed, the less whole they are. So you want it in its really most natural form. And I have in a little bit some advice on how to cook whole grains that are pretty easy, actually. I tried this at home, and it's actually not so hard to cook whole grains. It's kind of like beans. It just takes a little bit of time and some water, but otherwise it's really simple. So there is a third kind of subset of carbohydrates. These are called refined carbohydrates. So this is, as I was just mentioning, you take the whole grain, like a brown rice, and there are three main parts to that. So there's bran, there's endosperm, and germ. And I think almost everybody's had this in like a health class at some point in time. The bran and the germ are really where all the good stuff is, like all the fiber. Remember, fiber slows your digestion down, which is good. Antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. But it's also the first part of that product that will go bad, meaning it will go rancid. So in order to create more shelf-stable rice, they remove the bran and the germ, and it leaves only the endosperm, which is basically a lot of starch, carbohydrates, and just a little bit of protein. Because the fiber is removed, there's nothing then to slow down the digestion, and it really then acts like a simple carbohydrate, like sugar, causing the blood glucose to increase quickly and your insulin to spike. So let me summarize that again. You have some natural things that are called simple carbohydrates. Then you have complex carbohydrates. And then the third thing is refined carbohydrates. And refined carbohydrates are taking those good fiber-rich whole complex carbohydrates, and removing the part that makes them complex, thus for making them simple. So this is where a lot of people get tripped up. Even if you have a whole wheat tortilla, for example, there's still a lot of processing which has refined the whole wheat into a new product. So the fact that they've taken this whole wheat berry, it's actually called a berry when it's intact. If you have that whole wheat berry and then you have the equivalent of that whole wheat berry ground up, that step to grind up that berry from a berry to the flour is one less step that your body has to do to break that food down. And the more steps that you do that, the less your body has to work to break it down. So even if you see whole wheat tortilla, whole wheat bread, whole wheat bagel, the point is that you're still eating it in a refined setting, okay? Unless you're eating the whole wheat berry, you're eating a refined carbohydrate. Even if they leave the endosperm and the germ and the bran, all that stuff intact, you're still eating refined carbs. So all carbohydrates are eventually broken down into glucose, and this is absorbed or used as energy, or it can be stored for later on when energy is needed later. Foods that are really high in simple carbohydrates like sugar, they cause the blood glucose to increase rapidly. Then it requires a more concentrated hormone response, so that is the hormone insulin, to get the glucose out of our bloodstream. So it's kind of interesting how the body works here. So when your endocrine system, this is your hormone system, senses that there is sugar in your bloodstream, you just ate a piece of cake or something, it will send out insulin to process that, because it doesn't want the blood to be full of sugar. When the blood is full of sugar, it can cause lots of problems. Okay, so they want to utilize the sugar very quickly. So they either say, it's like, okay, we need to either use this as energy immediately, or we need to store this as fat. But we can't have it just roaming around in the hallways. Okay, it's like a high school student. You don't want them just roaming around. You want them in class or in detention, right? One of those two things. What happens with people with type 2 diabetes is and a lot of this is a lifestyle disease. is that they're eating a lot of refined or simple carbohydrates, and they have a lot of glucose in their bloodstream, but all the time, right? So if you just have a spike of insulin or blood glucose, and then your insulin responds to that, and it goes away, and that happens like once a day, big deal. Big deal. Who cares? But it's when you're eating and drinking a lot of refined carbs and simple carbs throughout the day, and that insulin response is on all the time. This is the problem. This is the thing that we need to avoid, because at some point when your body is that insulin, what it does is it attaches to a receptor in your cell to allow the glucose to go in. But when it's active all the time, then your body becomes desensitized to its own insulin. It's different for type 1 diabetics because it's really that they don't produce enough insulin, period. So it's not like their body doesn't react to it, their body just doesn't produce it. For type 2 diabetics, they produce too much and they become overwhelmed. And it's interesting because the treatment for most type 2 diabetics is to take more insulin so that they can process the carbs that they're eating. But this usually tends to make people overweight and fat because while you have insulin in your bloodstream, while you have insulin working, you can't use any fat for fuel. So again, it's not so complicated to understand how the body is working. It's just not intuitive if you don't know what insulin is doing. So while insulin is on in your body, your fat stores are turned off. You cannot use fat as energy because your body sees energy in the bloodstream in the form of sugar and says we need to use this first. So that's really kind of how it works on an overlap. So when you, over time, do these rapid spikes, it increasingly taxes your system. And then your ability to manage your blood sugar decreases. And you're less able to produce the amounts of insulin you need. It's almost like any other drug, as you use it more, your body becomes desensitized to it. So you need to use more of it to get the same effects. It's the same thing with insulin. So the insulin that you've produced that was normally managing your blood sugar just fine is now less effective. And that's really where you get into your type 2 diabetes. Like the other two macronutrients, there is a specific purpose for carbohydrates. So the main function is to provide energy. And complex carbohydrates, as I previously mentioned, contain fiber. And fiber is the key point that helps to reduce your cholesterol and helps to maintain a healthy weight. Carbohydrates are simply the vehicle to get fiber into your body. Okay? The best carbohydrates to eat are vegetables. Absolutely, hands down. These are the best carbohydrates to eat. So there are two types of fiber. There's soluble and insoluble. And first, let's talk what does soluble mean? Because I was on a Facebook group the other day and somebody mentioned soluble and insoluble. And the first response was, well, what does that mean? So if you haven't had a chemistry or biological or any kind of scientific background, you might not know what soluble means. So let's do that first. It's very, very simple. Soluble just means that something can be dissolved in water or it can absorb water. And insoluble means that it does not dissolve in water. So like salt can dissolve in water and become a solution. So therefore, salt is soluble. But oil is not soluble because it does not dissolve in water. It repels. Soluble fiber slows down digestion by increasing the digestive transit time. So that's how much time the food spends in your digestive tract, so in your large and small intestines. Soluble fiber swells in your intestine, and then it kind of like scrapes the lining as it passes by. But it doesn't do this very well without its friend insoluble fiber to help it. So insoluble fiber does not get digested, so what comes in must come out. So by keeping its complete mass the entire time, it moves through the digestive tract. It helps to move the other matter, including the soluble fiber, out of your body. So the soluble fiber is scraping the sides of your intestines to get all the junk off. And the insoluble fiber is like a big plug pushing it all through. It's really important that you have a very good elimination every day. That means you need to have a really good poop every day to keep your body's natural detoxification processes working, because one of the best way your body detoxifies is by pooping. Okay, you can detoxify also with sweating. You detoxify every time you breathe out. But yeah, pooping is really good. They like to call it elimination. Okay, but we all know it's poop. I just want to be clear that it's poop that we're talking about. Okay? If you don't poop once a day, you need to eat more fiber. Period. Now that we know what carbohydrates are, let's talk more about grains, specifically whole grains. I know we've already touched on it, but let's go a little bit deeper in these. Lately, I've been eating at a place in Basel called Be Good, and it's a Boston-based food chain, and so you might be able to find it in the States, but you could definitely find it in Switzerland or in all the major cities in Switzerland now. They have a bowl that starts with a mix of whole grains, and it's amazing. They are chewy and tasty, and their mix includes brown rice, kamut wheat, hard red wheat berries, as I mentioned, those are the whole wheat, millet, and lentils. And if you're gluten intolerant, they also can have this base with quinoa instead. So I think I'm pointing this out because it's nice to have an option like this now in the restaurant, so I don't have to always make it at home. I love cooking, but sometimes it's just, it's nice to have options when you eat out of grains. But let's talk about how you can prepare whole grains at home. And like I said earlier, they're easier, if not as easy than cooking beans and legumes. And as I talked about in episode 10, if you missed that, go back to episode 10 to learn more about cooking beans and legumes to help them cook better and also to help them not give you so much gas. But first of all, before I talk about cooking them, let me run through a list of whole grains that you can incorporate into your daily diet. So the first ones I'm going to talk about are ones that contain gluten. So this is barley, bulgur, which is also called cracked wheat, couscous, kamut, rye berries, spelt, wheat berries. So those are all the ones that have gluten in them. And then there are gluten-free grains. This is amaranth, brown rice, buckwheat is also called kasha, and cornmeal, millet, oats, quinoa, and wild rice. So there are options for people that have gluten insensitivity and those who have no gluten insensitivity. And they all sound kind of like foreign, but honestly, at least in Switzerland, I can find a lot of this stuff just in my local grocery store. I don't even need to go to a health food store to find it. So check it out, look for it in your grocery store and see if you can find it. If not, you can always order these things online and they last forever. It's kind of like beans, So cooking grains is dead easy, as with beans. The key word is to soak these bad boys. Soaking them will make them super soft, and it also reduces a thing called phytic acid. And phytic acid actually binds to iron and calcium in your body and can contribute to deficiencies. So especially people like vegetarians. So remember to soak it to get rid of that. After soaking, you simply put them in a pot with fresh water and cook them till they're done. Now, there's lots of different variations on how long you need to cook them, but this is all stuff you can find on the internet. Maybe I can throw a table up on my show notes, but the key thing is to not stir them. Just let them cook. So we could do really a whole episode on just whole grains. There's a lot of information. But just keep in mind that small quantities of whole grains in your diet are really beneficial because of the fiber and other minerals that you get. So next time you're in the grocery store, check out all the different options and just try something new. Just buy one new grain, Google a recipe for it, and make a big pot, stick it in your fridge. Try a very simple one to try is just do brown rice instead of white rice. Just make that one switch and see how it goes. Actually, I'm a big fan of sushi. And the other day I had a poke bowl at one of my favorite sushi places. And I tried it with the brown rice option instead of the white rice. And you know what? I could hardly taste a difference. I think it was actually even better. Guess it was a little chewy. And it was fantastic. So just try one little switch and see how it goes. The next time, try another switch. These grains last for really a long time in your pantry. So the guest speaker for this module concerning grains was Andrea Beeman. We first saw her in like module 4 or 5 as she kind of showed us some simple recipes to get started in healthy cooking. And this module, she further went into like the goodness of grains. Now she's an IIN graduate, and I think she does cooking shows and whatnot. But I'm going to go ahead and link a YouTube video in the show notes for you, so you can go and kind of watch how she works with grains. So now on to the coaching side of the module. So why should anyone become a health coach? So I thought it would be best to kind of hear this straight from Joshua. So I'm going to play a clip here, and he's going to explain why it's interesting to become a health coach.
So today in America, there is definitely a health crisis. I keep thinking, well, someone's going to step up to the plate and take action so that Americans have our natural-born right to be healthy. But so far, that hasn't really happened. There's a lot of arguing and fighting and things like that. But there is a health crisis. In addition to people being increasingly overweight and obese, every year, more and more people are on more and more medication at younger and younger ages. And it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. Number 2, it's an excellent career opportunity. It's really remarkable that people can be trained to do effective work with the general public in the area of health. There's no other program anywhere close to this, where you can step into the health industry and work in this field in the middle of the crisis and be well paid for your time and your work. So one thing is you want to do this for yourself, for your family and friends. And the concept of the school is that you don't need to be an RD, an MD, or a PhD to be able to help people with their food. And what most people really need coaching with is just that there are healthier versions of the exact same foods that they're eating. And with a little modification and education, it's just that the average American has little to no access to someone who will fundamentally just hold their hand and walk them through what's basically a very simple process.
I chose to become a health coach to learn more about nutrition and health, first and foremost for myself. And this is exactly what Joshua talks about when he says you need to walk the talk. And I know that my health is a journey, and I just really wanted a better roadmap and more information about my journey. It's kind of like, going on a road trip without a map, right? It's much easier to get where you're going with a map, even though you might eventually get there without a map. The second reason I started this journey to become a health coach was because the course was going to give me a little bit something more in my life. I'm not sure how that will turn out in 6 months or even 6 years, but I know for one thing is that my life has definitely changed for the better by taking this one step of becoming a health coach. If I never use the health coaching as a business, if I only use it for my own self, this is fine. I think I've stated this before earlier in my earlier episodes, but now that we're in episode 11 and I'm, reflecting back, I can see definitely a change in my life. And one of the biggest things is really the power of connection, the power of camaraderie, of a community, of a tribe. And I see this more and more coming up. And there's a lot of information now about how, humans are social creatures. Most mammals are social creatures. And so you function better when you have a small support group, of people around you. In Module 10, the Health Histories were open, which was so cool because we've been hearing about these health histories, and it's a requirement for the course. But if you're listening to this and you're not in the IIN school, the term may not be so universal. So let me explain. So health history, or sometimes referred to as kind of like an intake questionnaire, is a form to complete by the prospective client. And then it's used in an introductory meeting. So they kind of combine these two things together. They say, perform a health history. Well, in order to do health history, you need to have someone filling out the form, but the health history is also the meeting. So it's this kind of all-in-one point. So it's the starting point for the process of reviewing a person's health and goals to see if they're a good fit to work with you. Learning how to do the initial consultation is extremely important. It's like a first date where you're trying to figure out if there is a future together with you. The health history needs to be all about the prospective client. You need to ask really good questions and practice all your listening skills to really, I'm using air quotes, hear what the person wants, because they might say something, but you need to keep asking the right questions to dig down to the real reason why they want to do something, why they want this goal that they're going for, so you can understand better and help them better. In this module, they outline some listening tips to try out in each of like our normal everyday conversations, so that when we are doing an initial consultation or a health history, we can easily and actively listen. A few suggestions for listening tips, or a few suggestions for having these health histories, are to meet in the right environment for listening. So you don't really want to have your initial consultation at a soccer game, for example. I heard one lady say they were doing a health history over the phone, and she found out that the woman was grocery shopping. And she's like, this is really, you can't grocery shop and have a good conversation at the same time. So that's what it means by just finding the right environment. So whether you're meeting the person face to face, you have this in a nice space with them, or on the phone, just ensure that they are, in a space where they can be fully focused on what you guys are talking about. Maintaining a strong eye contact, but not trying to stare them down, but definitely not looking at your watch or your phone. Just being present with the other person. And with that said, you do want to take good notes so that you can refer back when you need to. For the first health history that I did, I asked very nicely if I could record the health history audio. I still took notes, because what my process was, the audio is for me to go back and listen to again, to hear things I didn't hear the first time, right? You think you're listening, but you might not hear things. And the second reason I wanted to record it was to listen to myself. How did I respond? What was my tone? Did I give enough time for them to respond? But I still went ahead and took notes, because the notes were what I was thinking about at the time she was talking. So that's not something that will be captured in a recording, but it is something like that I can make a note, like a question I have, or a thing to follow up on, or whatnot at the end. So if your person will allow you to take an audio recording, that's great, because you can use it in that way, especially if you're a health coach in training. Lastly, they say to do active listening, like what does that mean? What is actively listening? Well, you need to listen to the other person and then kind of use phrases like mirroring back to them. What I hear you saying is, and then repeat it back in your own words. And this does really two things to help. It helps you retain the information better and to clarify what you heard. So if there was something you misheard, that can be kind of corrected right away. But it also demonstrates to the other person that you're actually listening and genuinely interested. So that's anytime you want to, you have a conversation with your manager or an important person or just anybody, really, you should give that respect to actively listen to them and hear what they have to say. A lot of people they're formulating the next question in their mind, but not really listening to what the person's saying at the present. So I think that's a good tool to use for anybody. And what it does is it helps to establish a trust and intimacy between the coach and the client. And as students, we are required to perform 6 of these health histories or initial consultations in order to pass the course. But they recommend to try and do like 2 of these a week from now on, so you get lots of practice and to feel comfortable with it. I started and did my first health history with my accountability coach, which is another IIN student. And I also did a health history with a colleague at work. So I've done 2 of them, and I've sent a couple more out to be done, and I need to just schedule those. If you're interested in helping me with my health history portion of the training, and to get basically a free consultation or discovery session, just send me an email at becomingahealthcoach@gmail.com. And also, if you have any other questions or comments, or you just want to catch up on earlier episodes of the podcast, head on over to mybestself.fit, or you can subscribe to the podcast using iTunes. That's really it for episode 11 of Becoming a Health Coach. I hope you found this episode interesting. I find this topic and this, learning about how carbohydrates work, how insulin works, the hormones, and the gut. I think the more times I hear about this, it becomes more and more clear to me. So I'm hoping I can present that information in a way that it becomes more clear to you. Because, there's a lot of different ideas on how you should eat out there. But I think if you understand really how your body works and what goes on in your body, you can make much better decisions on your own diet and how those things work for you, and, to do that experiment of one. So again, that's it for this episode of Becoming a Health Coach. I'm Megan McCrory. I'm really glad that you joined me today. Stay happy and healthy, and I'll see you next time. Hey, you're still listening. Great. Okay. Now I can tell you about my 12-week goal setting session. So in this 1-hour session, I'm going to help guide you through a powerful process inspired by the best-selling book, The 12-Week Year. I know. Everybody at this time of the year starts to think about year-long goals. And I would argue that year-long goals are really hard to contextualize. What is going to be happening in a year from now? You have no idea. But 12 weeks gives you a little bit better understanding, because you kind of already have your calendar booked out for the next 12 weeks, kind of know what's going to be going on. So if you can focus your goals on the next 12 weeks, you can make some really big actionable steps towards your long-term vision. So in this 1-hour session, we do talk about long-term vision. We talk about where you want to be. We talk about what your 5-year, 10-year, 3-year, all those goals are. But that's only a brief part. We know we see the long distance view, but let's break that down. And then we get into the 1 to 3 strategic 12-week goals that are going to get you to those long-term vision. Then we're going to put that into a really cool action plan with like checklists and timing and all that jazz to make sure that you are clear and that you have accountability to get those goals done. And then that's not it. Then we are going to tackle your roadblocks, because you have roadblocks. So we're going to tackle those roadblocks. We're going to create a plan to overcome them. So when you start to self-sabotage, what you can do to get around those roadblocks. Okay, so if this is interesting for you, it is only 1 hour of your time, and it's only 45 Swiss francs. I host this gig over on Fiverr, but I'm also going to put a link down in the show notes. So if you're interested, hit me up.